Husband secretly booked his mom and himself on business class on our honeymoon and gave me a separate economy ticket. So I confronted him in the lounge in front of everyone. So me, 32F, and my husband Van, 36M, got married recently. We have been together for 4 years and were engaged for the past 8 months. I met him when I was 29 years old. I was working as a manager at a bar and he used to frequently come to the bar as a customer. We struck up a conversation and he asked me out. I refused and he would keep coming to the bar to find reasons to talk to me. My coworkers would tease me about it and tell me how sweet this was of him. One day I just decided to give him a chance and the rest is history. Everything about Van is great. He is sweet, kind, mature, financially independent, and plans all our dates. The only thing I have a problem with is his mother, Naomi. Now before you judge me, I used to love his mom when I first met her. You see, Van was 13 when his parents split up. His dad, Matt, had been cheating with a female coworker. As you can imagine, this completely broke Naomi's heart because she and Matt were college sweethearts. Matt begged her to forgive him, saying how he had never been anyone except her, which is why he lost himself and made such a stupid mistake, but Naomi refused and filed for divorce. Of course, what Matt did was horrible, but Van was too young to understand anything and was heartbroken to see his parents split up. His dad got the weekends while he would be staying with his mother during the weekdays for his school. Regardless of what Matt did to break up their family, he was a good father to Van. He would be there for Van and cheering him on for every sports event or meeting the teachers during parent-teacher meetings. Matt was quite an involved father and most importantly, he allowed Van to be himself. Naomi, on the other hand, was extremely strict. I don't know, maybe it was because of Matt's cheating, but she had become extremely possessive about Van. Here are some of the things that Van has told me that he wasn't allowed to do. He wasn't allowed to stay out late with his friends, he wasn't allowed to date, he wasn't allowed to join his friends for any picnic or class trips, he wasn't allowed to be near any water bodies, no sleepovers with any friends. When Van had told me these rules, they sounded extremely ridiculous, but Van explained how his mother would justify them by saying that she was lonely without him and that she just wanted to protect him from the rest of the world. As you can imagine, Van quickly realized that he liked staying with his dad more than his mom. Matt never had any of these rules. The only rule he wanted his son, Van, to follow was to not stay out too late and to always share locations with him when he went out with his friends, just in case he was ever in an emergency. Whenever there was a class trip coming up, Naomi would forbid Van from participating, but Matt would enroll his name and would encourage his son to join the trip. This would result in a huge fight between Naomi and Matt, with Naomi threatening to take him to court. If Van wanted to go out with his friends, his mother would refuse, so he would wait for the weekends when he would stay with his dad so then he could go to concerts with his friends or eat out. When Van started growing into a teenager, he started hating living with his mom because they would have constant fights. She would have a problem with his dressing style, his hairstyle, and his friends. He would spend all day in his room hiding until the weekend when he would be finally free with his dad. When Van turned 17 years old, Matt introduced him to his current wife Heather. Heather is a sweet person and has always loved Van as her own son. She had faced fertility issues early on but had to eventually accept that she could never have a child. But when she met Matt, she was pleasantly surprised to know that he had a son. Heather sort of became a second maternal figure for Van, who adored her as well. But this was something that was unacceptable for Naomi. She just couldn't let another woman into her son's life and would have huge fights with Van regarding this. She would try to poison his mind by saying how his dad was probably cheating with this woman while still married and that he should not accept his dad's second wife. This was of course not true, since Heather came into Matt's life long after he was divorced and living alone. However, Naomi refuses to accept this and starts to make Matt's life difficult by not allowing him to see Van. Van would excitedly wait for the weekends to come, but Naomi would tell him that he wasn't allowed to see his dad since there was no guarantee what kind of a woman Heather was and she couldn't allow him to live with strangers. This of course led to a lot of nasty fights between Matt and Naomi because she refused to budge. When Van turned 18, he was finally an adult. He had been accepted into 2 universities, but his mother had been pressuring him to go to the one near her place so she could drive and see him every weekend. He didn't like that university since it didn't have enough resources in the field he was interested in and talked with his dad honestly about it. Matt encouraged him to make a decision regardless of what his mother wanted, but Van was scared of upsetting his mother. In the end, he chose that university, which was far off. This led to another meltdown by Naomi. She started yelling at him about how he was abandoning her and how all men are the same. She was threatening to kick him out and telling him how she wouldn't be paying for his college fees if he didn't go to the university she wanted him to choose. This led to Van calling his dad for help, and Matt immediately drove over to help pack up Van's things so he could live with him. Van has told me how Naomi kept screaming filthy things at him and his dad, which is the last thing he saw before they drove away. In the end, Van did go to his choice university and Matt assured him that he would be paying whatever he could for his fees, and for the rest, Van would have to take a small student loan which would be manageable to be repaid off. When Van went away to college, he stopped meeting or talking to his mom. She would of course send him a barrage of texts every day which would range from apologizing to blaming him for ruining her life. Van has told me that he would miss his mom a lot during college but didn't want to have to deal with her shit again. Matt would constantly remain in touch with Van and they would meet up during the holidays. In his second year of college, Van received a call from the hospital which informed him that his mother had tried to end her life. He immediately called his dad and they rushed to the hospital. Naomi was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression and was admitted to be supervised for 72 hours. This was a turning point for Van. He broke down that his mother had gone to such lengths and started blaming himself for everything. He has told me how he would sit by his mother's bed asking for her forgiveness and praying for her to recover. When Naomi was discharged, she was prescribed medications. Van promised her that he would never leave her again and kept in constant touch with her. After college, he decided to move back to his hometown so he could live near his mother. He of course had his own place, but he was just a phone call away from her in case she ever needed him, which she has since taken full advantage of. Since the incident, Van has always been living in a state of anxiety and guilt when it comes to his mother. He believes that his mother is extremely fragile and whatever she says to him, he listens even if he doesn't want to. When Van opened up to me about all this, I was of course quite sympathetic and understanding. His mother had been going for regular checkups and therapy classes, so I thought she would be doing better. When I met his mother for the first time, she seemed sweet but would also make subtly weird comments about my height, color, or weight, like how I should lose more weight to keep my man happy, or Van was fairer than me so hopefully our baby is fair also. She would also say things about Van like how her baby boy deserves the best, her child should never have to be in the kitchen, or how Van could do so much better than me but he was choosing to settle. This would of course bother me a bit, but I would try to not take it seriously and just let her say whatever she wanted. However, over time, as Van and I have progressed in our relationship, I started noticing the toll Naomi's emotional struggles were taking on Van. She would call him every day in the morning asking if he had a good breakfast. If he ever missed the call, she would keep calling him multiple times until he would pick up. When I moved in with Van, she would even call me just to ask why her son wasn't picking up the call and if I was trying to keep him away from her. He would often cancel dates or leave events abruptly, claiming that his mother needed him because she would call him demanding he visit her because she was not feeling well. If Van was awarded something at work, then for his +1, he had to take his mother instead of me, otherwise she would have a fit. Whenever we wanted to go somewhere for vacation, she would force him to share the location with him, telling him how this would make her sleep better at night. All of this would of course make me uncomfortable. I could also sense Van's internal conflict between his desire for a normal life and his commitment to his troubled mother. He didn't want to do everything she demanded, but he was scared that she might again do something drastic. In contrast to his mother, his dad, Matt, was extremely chill. I have met Matt and his wife Heather several times and both of them are always very welcoming. They would never ask us invasive questions and Matt was genuinely interested in me without trying to belittle me. I could see some of these good qualities of Matt in Van as well. I guess this is why I stuck by Van. I could see that he was so much more than what his mother had put him through. I understood that he needed therapy as well and would encourage him to talk more, but he always said he was okay. When Van decided to propose to me, which was a complete shock to me, it was one of the happiest days of my life. He had flown my parents and my best friend to our city as a surprise to be a part of our celebration. Matt and Heather were also there and congratulated us profusely. The only person who was missing was Naomi, and Van told me how she was apparently not feeling well. I was honestly glad that she was not there, since I didn't want her to say something uncomfortable in front of my parents who would immediately start to dislike her. We were all having a good time when Van received a call from the hospital saying that his mother had fallen down the staircase. All of us rushed to be there for her, but Naomi refused to see me or anyone else. She asked that only Van should be allowed to see her in the room, so we all had to wait outside. I felt it was a bit odd since we had all anyways come to check up on her, but it wasn't the right place to say anything. When Van came out, he informed us that she was going to be okay and it was a fracture according to the doctor, but she had to stay overnight, so she wanted him to stay with her. Matt immediately told Van that he was happy to stay with his mother since she would basically be sleeping anyways and that he should take me back home, but Van refused, saying that Naomi wouldn't like it and he didn't want to do anything further by upsetting my mom. Eventually, we all came back home and my parents and best friend helped me clean up. Van had booked hotel rooms for them for the night, but they decided to stay with me. I guess they could all see that I was a bit sad that I wouldn't be spending my night with my fiancé on the day he proposed to me. This should have been my first sign that everything was just going to go downhill after that. Our wedding preparations were overshadowed by what Naomi wanted. She would interfere in what wedding dress I should wear, who our flower girl would be, and the suit Van would be wearing. She had strong opinions on the guest list, the venue, and practically every detail. When it came to our honeymoon, Van and I had long been discussing going to Hawaii, but Naomi kept insisting that we should not be flying so far just for a honeymoon and that going somewhere nearby was much better. This is when I decided to put my foot down and told her no. Naomi was quite taken aback and told me how it was disrespectful of me to talk to her this way, but I told her firmly that this honeymoon was about me and Van, so we were the ones who would be deciding where we wanted to go. She started crying hearing this and telling Van how I was excluding, ignoring, and pushing her away. She blamed me for trying to keep her away from her son, which was so ridiculous. I told her that I had gone with her officiant, her venue idea, her cake idea, and even on what dresses my bridesmaids were allowed to wear, so I was trying my best to listen to her, but I wasn't going to allow her to force us into going for our honeymoon to a place we didn't want to go to. Van, torn between his obligations to his mother and his commitment to our wedding, tried to talk with her, but she painted herself as some sort of a martyr who was sacrificing her son. Later, I even texted her an apology because I knew how important she was to Van, but she responded by saying that no woman could take her son away from her and that I should learn my place. I immediately showed the message to Van, who called his mother for clarification, but she said how I was trying to plant discord in their relationship and that he should always love and believe her more than me. I found this extremely uncomfortable, so I pointed it out to Van after their phone call, and to my relief, he agreed. He assured me that we would stick to our original plan and go to Hawaii, just like we had decided. This brought me immense happiness, as it seemed like Van was finally standing up to his mother, and we could have a honeymoon away from her prying eyes. The wedding went well without any major incidents. However, during the reception, Mill managed to make an entire speech about herself, emphasizing how much she had sacrificed in her life. It felt like a subtle attempt to redirect the attention back to her, even on our special day. Despite this, I chose to focus on the positive aspects and the fact that we were heading to Hawaii soon for our honeymoon. My parents, Matt, Heather, and the rest of the guests had a great time at our wedding, and we danced away all night. On the day of our honeymoon, I woke up excitedly. Van and I got ready for the airport, and I was just so happy. However, when we reached the airport, I discovered that Van had booked himself business class seats while I had economy class. This was news to me, since I would have happily paid for business class. Van had insisted on planning the entire trip himself, hence I had assumed he would book our tickets next to each other. When I questioned Van, he told me how he had got a last-minute deal and decided to upgrade his ticket but couldn't find an empty business class seat for me. I found it a bit suspicious because he kept avoiding my eyes. He told me how it wasn't such a big deal and that it was just a matter of a few hours. I told him if that was the case, then he could fly economy and I would fly business class, since he didn't think it was such a big deal anyway. Van got pissed and kept repeating how I should not be so sensitive and that he would meet me later after the flight. I asked him where he was going and he told me that he was going to go into the business class lounge. Confused and hurt, I struggled to comprehend the reason behind this discrepancy. My attempts to communicate with him were met with a cold demeanor, leaving me to wait for our flight alone. Honestly, I felt like crying, but I didn't want to start our honeymoon depressed, so I went to the washroom to freshen up. Then, I sat down in the waiting area until it was time to board our flight. I called Van several times, but he didn't pick up my call, so I grew even more suspicious. I felt it in my gut that something just wasn't right. Then, I received a call from Mill, which was unexpected since she never called me unless she was trying to get in touch with Van. I picked up the call to let her know that Van would call her back in a few minutes, but Mill started asking me questions about where I was, which was odd since she could have guessed I was at the airport. I told her that I was waiting for my flight, but then she started asking specific questions like if I was waiting near this cafe or the lounge. I was already frustrated about what Van had done and I had no patience left for Mill's mind games. So I straight up asked her what it was that she wanted. Mill hesitated and then in her usual taunting tone started saying how I should not lose my cool, but that she was coming for our honeymoon also. I lost my cool at that moment and yelled at her if she was joking. Naomi told me how she just wanted to be close to him and didn't want him to fly so far away from him, so she had convinced him to let her fly with us. I was so angry by that point that I just cut her call short and walked to the business lounge. The security didn't want to allow me in, but I informed them that my husband was inside and I needed to inform him something really urgent about his mother, but he wasn't picking up my calls. After a lot of persuasion, the security escorted me inside so I could talk to my husband. I was shocked to see Van sitting and scrolling through his phone, which meant that he had his phone with him the entire time and was knowingly ignoring my calls. I walked towards him and he looked up in surprise to see me with the security. He asked me if something was wrong, but I questioned him if it was true that Mill was coming for our honeymoon. Van looked at me frozen in shock. I questioned him if this was why he had booked a separate ticket for me so I wouldn't find out, since he was flying for our honeymoon with his mommy. Van got red in his face as people around us started staring and whispering. Even the security guy was invested in our fight. This is when Mill walked into the lounge with her head turning everywhere, probably looking for Van. When she looked at us, she stopped dead in her tracks. I told Van how his mother had called me to inform me about his plans. Hearing this, Van tried to explain to me how he had originally booked tickets just for us in economy, but Naomi kept crying and pleading with him, so in an attempt to keep both of us happy, he decided to book separate tickets so I would never find out. He told me how he had booked a completely different hotel for Mill, so she was never even going to bother us. Mill came up to us and, as usual, tried to interfere. She told me how I should be happy that her son loved her so much and that it wasn't a big deal if she was coming along, since she had never been so far away from her son. I was losing my shit at this point, and if it wasn't the airport I would have ripped her hair out. Instead, I had to remain dignified, so I yelled at my husband loudly, saying that I was embarrassed of marrying a child who could not go anywhere without his mother tagging along with us, and how he seemed more like her husband than her son. Van started whispering how I was trying to embarrass him in front of affluent people, and how we could have this conversation later in Hawaii. I laughed at his face and told him that he could have fun on his honeymoon with his mommy since I was done with this marriage. Mill and Van looked at me wide-eyed in shock as I walked out. I tore my tickets in half and booked a cab home. Ultimately, Van also decided not to go and rushed back home and started to berate me how I had no right to talk to him that way, and how he did what he thought was right. He told me how Mill had to fly out alone since she didn't want to waste her ticket. I just locked myself in the washroom so I could cry because I couldn't bear to see his face. This all happened yesterday and I have been in a daze ever since. I clearly know that our marriage is over because neither is my husband asking me for forgiveness nor is he talking to me, which really hurts me. Walking out of this marriage is a huge deal when just 3 days ago, I was looking forward to spending the rest of my life with him. This is why I am on Reddit. Ida for leaving my husband after he wanted to bring his mother for our honeymoon? Update 1. Wow, thank you everyone so much for all the hundreds of comments and DMs I have received. When I wrote this, I didn't think I would have so many internet strangers reaching out to me and offering comforting words. I have gone through all your comments and I agree with some of you that I need to have one last discussion with my husband regarding this. If my husband continues to support his mother, then I will have no choice but to end our marriage since I can't keep fighting with him about this our entire life. Naomi clearly doesn't care about us since she had the audacity to fly to Hawaii alone when she knew this all happened because of her. I will update you once we discuss this. Update 2. It has been a month since my last update and a lot has happened since then. After my last update, I decided to take a bold step. The situation was too overwhelming, and I couldn't let it linger without a proper confrontation. So, I packed up my bags, determined to have a conversation with Van when he returned from work. Thai conversation could either break our marriage or make it better. When Van walked through the door and saw me waiting for him, a mix of surprise and concern flickered across his face. I asked him to sit down and offered him a glass of water. The tension in the room was palpable. We hadn't been communicating since the incident as he still felt like I owed him an apology. Taking a deep breath, I decided to open up about everything right from the start, how his mother had made me feel from the beginning of our relationship. I detailed how I noticed the change in his behavior when she was around, and how he seemed to transform into a different person around her. I acknowledged the guilt he carried in his heart due to his mother's past, the sacrifices she claimed to have made for him, and how it had slowly eaten away at the foundation we had built. Tears welled up in my eyes as I expressed how difficult she had made my life with her constant interference, not just in our wedding but also in our honeymoon. I poured out my feelings, explaining that I fell in love with him for his kindness and sweetness, but the dynamic with his mother was eroding what we had. I cried as I spoke, laying bare the emotional toll it had taken on me. As I reached the end of my speech, I noticed that Van, too, had tears streaming down his face. It shocked me to see him break down like this. He began to speak, expressing that he had no idea I had been feeling this way since the start of our relationship. He confessed how he had grown accustomed to taking care of his mom all his life, always living in fear that something bad might happen to her. His tears flowed uncontrollably as he shared the constant internal struggle he faced. He told me how he had become so conditioned to always take care of her and put her needs above everyone else that he didn't know how to come out of it. He explained how he knew that bringing his mother on the honeymoon was wrong, but she had guilt-tripped him, and he had caved, thinking it was the best course of action just to keep her happy. I pointed out to him that if his mother had really wanted to be near him then she would not have gone to Hawaii and stayed behind for him. He nodded and told me that he had been blind to see all her manipulations until now. The weight of his emotions became apparent as he went down on his knees, apologizing to me repeatedly. This broke my heart and I hugged him, understanding the immense suffering he had endured. It became clear that this man needed counseling, and as long as he recognized his faults and was willing to work on it, I was ready to go through this marriage with him. In the following 2 weeks, Van made an appointment and began seeing a therapist. He also had a heartfelt conversation with his dad, regarding all this. Matt had no idea about the incident and was taken aback that Naomi had caused all of this. His dad echoed the same sentiments I had shared and told Van how it was time for him to stop worrying about his mother and live his life unapologetically. With the guidance of his therapist, Van has decided to go low contact with his mother, recognizing the need for space to sort out his thoughts. But this is going to be a very difficult decision since Mill keeps calling him all the time. He hasn't told her about the therapist, but she is definitely going to flip out. He plans on telling her this coming weekend to give him space, and if she refuses then he will have no choice but to block her. Overall, I think this has been a significant development, the right step toward healing our relationship. I understand that the journey won't be easy, but for the first time, it feels like we are moving in the right direction. Update 3. 3 months have passed since my last update, and I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has been following my story and offering support. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, and I appreciate the encouragement from this community. Firstly, Van did have a conversation with his mother after the talk with his therapist. As expected, it didn't go smoothly. She unleashed a barrage of accusations, screaming and yelling at him, blaming me for taking him away from her. She insisted that he should divorce me, claiming that I was the reason for their strained relationship and that they were so much happier before me. However, Van finally put his foot down. He firmly informed her that he would not tolerate her manipulative behavior any longer. He made it clear that she needed to respect our relationship and boundaries. After delivering this ultimatum, Van took a decisive step. He blocked his mother from his phone. I did the same as well. This move was necessary for both our sanity and the health of our relationship. Naturally, his mother then began to complain to anyone who would listen about being abandoned by her son and how terrible her deal was. The gossip and rumors did get back to us from various acquaintances and family members, but we remained resilient and focused on our own happiness. Matt, Van's dad, has played a crucial role during this time. He has stepped in occasionally to check up on Van's mother, ensuring she was doing okay and taking her medications regularly. Since cutting ties with his mother, Van has experienced a notable improvement in his emotional well-being. The cloud of anxiety and guilt that had lingered over him before is no longer present. We have started going out for date nights without the constant interruption by incessant calls of his mother, creating an environment where we are able to truly enjoy each other's company. As for what happened to our honeymoon, Van decided to fix things and surprised me with a trip to Hawaii. This time, we both flew business class together, finally having the peaceful and romantic getaway that we had envisioned. It was a wonderful vacation that allowed us to strengthen our bond and create positive memories together. Overall, I do feel a sense of happiness and optimism for our future. Despite the challenges, my husband's growth and commitment to our relationship have been evident. If there are further developments, I'll be sure to update you all.
My creepy neighbor pointed his telescope directly at my bedroom, and the police refused to take it seriously, so I took matters into my own hands. A few months ago, a man moved in across the street from me, and on his very first day, I noticed he had set up a telescope outside his window and aimed it directly at my bedroom. My first encounter with him came a few days later. He knocked on my door to introduce himself, and one of the first things he told me was, I was worth going to jail for. My blood ran cold, and the entire interaction was unpleasant. I closed the door on him, but he persisted until I opened it again, warning him not to come inside. He stared at me blankly, then walked away with a smile and without a word. I went back inside immediately after and ran up to my bedroom, and was not at all surprised to see that his telescope was still pointed at my bedroom. I remember taking a super long shower to hopefully clear my mind, but I could not settle it. Every sound I heard reminded me of him, and so the next day, I went to the police. I thought surely they would listen to me and explain the situation and how concerned I was. Unfortunately, I was reminded that as a woman, sometimes you are not taken seriously, even in situations like these, as the officers listened but seemed uninterested in what I had to say. One asked me if I was sure that I wasn't imagining things, and the other said it's not illegal to own a telescope and to come back when I have actual proof. Apparently him coming over and making such a remark was not enough either, as that was clearly just a distasteful joke in the eyes of the officers. I remember coming home defeated, and a few days later, just as I thought it would, things got worse. One evening as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something through the window. His shadowy figure was hunched over the telescope as usual, but his movements were different, more frantic. I realized that he was rubbing one out while watching me, and again when he noticed that I was looking at him, he didn't stop. He started moving his hand faster, as if me watching him was exactly what he wanted, and just before I could leave the window, the movement stopped, and he took his hand out. I saw something drip from his hand and felt sick to my stomach. I actually went into the bathroom and got sick. I stayed awake all night that night, realizing that this truly was a nightmare, and that this man was a psychopath who would terrorize me to no end if someone didn't stop him. I stayed awake until the stations opened, and as soon as they did, I went back to the police. I told them what I had seen, explained that my eye bags were because I had not slept because of what I had seen, and desperately hoped they would understand the severity of the situation. I said that I was scared that he'd eventually find his way into my home somehow. I even told them about my ex and how he was a stalker. I went into detail about how after our relationship he kept visiting me at my job, kept running into me, leaving notes for me at my door. I said this all in an attempt to get them to understand. However, once again, I was reminded what it's like to be a woman. They told me that if I was so worried about him, then I needed to move or get better curtains. Another officer said that they needed concrete evidence, and my word just wasn't enough. It was clear that I wouldn't get any help from them unless it was too late. I knew I had to do something myself if I wanted the stranger to leave me alone. Weeks passed, and the stranger from the window tried to get closer and closer to me. I knew the second the gifts started appearing on my doorstep that this had gone too far. They were small things at first. Flowers, chocolates, a book I had once mentioned in a conversation at the local cafe when I was grabbing coffee with my best friend. Then, he started coming over and presenting these gifts to me in person. He would ask to hang out often, but I always told him I was busy. Things were getting extremely out of hand, and one evening he excitedly knocked on my door, holding a small box. He handed me the box to open. He seemed proud of himself. I found them together. They were in love, so I had to keep them together, forever. In the box were 2 frogs that he unalived himself and kept in a shoebox decorated in white. He called them Chris and Curtis. My stomach churned, and I forced a smile. I felt my insides boiling, however, and the taste of sick started creeping up on me. I have to go, I said, closing the door before running to the bathroom to get sick. He was a psychopath, a monster. Throughout this whole time, the telescope stayed there too, and I caught him looking at it on way more than one occasion. When he showed up at my door one evening with a stuffed animal and a creepy smile yet again, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. If the justice system wasn't going to help me, I would have to help myself. It took a lot of courage for me to do this, but the best thing I ever thought of was to play along. I had deducted that if I was going to be friends with him, he wouldn't hurt me. He was way too infatuated with me to ever do that, even if I was just friends with him. And so that's what I did. I kept him at a a distance but pretended to befriend him. I invited him over for coffee. I knew that my brother would be in town that weekend and had his number on speed dial. When he walked in, he tried to hug me, but I shook his hand and led him to the kitchen counter. We talked while we drank coffee. He told me that I had the most beautiful bedroom and that I looked even better so close up. We only sat in the living room when he came over, so I knew then that he was referring to the times he'd watch me through the telescope. I felt a shiver run down my spine and forced a polite, "Thank you." It was getting late, and I told my brother to call me at exactly 6 p.m. to have an excuse to kick the stalker guy out of my house. It was 10 minutes before 6 when I realized I didn't know his name. He told me it was Joseph, and before I could give him a fake name, he said, "I enjoyed my time here with you, Mia," and tried again to hug me. I shook his hand once again and sent him off. Hearing him say my name was sickening. I felt violated. This nightmare was becoming a lot to handle, and after that encounter with him, I kept thinking if this was really such a good idea. However, I was still determined to stand for myself, and so I kept going along with it. The next week, he invited me to his apartment to watch a movie. He asked if I had watched Silence of the Lambs before, and I told him no, and we agreed to watch it. The movie choice felt odd as a first pick, but I went with it. I noticed multiple times throughout the movie he would look at me, hoping that I'd look back, but I recognized that look. It was the dead fish stare that men give you before they tried to kiss you. I never returned the glance. Each time he invited me over, we'd watch a movie and order food, but over time I noticed something. He never let me into his room. He always kept that door firmly shut. I knew there had to be something in there that he didn't want me to see, because one night after, we watched a movie. I told him that I was going to use the restroom before I went back to my apartment, and as I got up to head to his bedroom, he grabbed my arm tightly and twisted it. I jumped. I turned around, terrified of what he might do next. He realized he was hurting me and let go. He smiled and told me that his toilet wasn't flushing properly at the moment and that maintenance would be in to fix it soon. I told him no worries and got out of that apartment as fast as I could. I normally keep boundaries around him, but this time I had let it get too out of my control. But I knew that room held the evidence I needed to prove his obsession with me. It sickened me to think about what I might find in there, but I knew it was my only chance to put an end to this. One afternoon, I went to his house with a plan. I had brought a bottle of wine to drink while we watched another movie. We sat down, and I poured us each a glass of wine. Joseph immediately scooted closer, his thigh pressing against mine. He talked animatedly. I nodded and acted engaged in the conversation. As the movie played, Joseph's hand found its way to my knee and squeezed it. I stiffened, but he didn't seem to notice. Instead, he leaned in closer. His breath was hot against my ear and mentioned how alcohol made him feel more intimate. I forced a laugh. He whispered about how beautiful he found me and how long he had been waiting for that night. I excused myself for a moment and told him that I was fetching more wine. I was nervous as I discreetly slipped something into his glass. Returning to the living room, I handed him the drink. My heart was pounding in my chest. Joseph took a long sip, his eyes never leaving mine. Gradually, his speech slurred and I saw his eyelids starting to droop. He mumbled something about needing to lie down, struggling to keep his eyes open. Even while he was fading away, Joseph wanted me badly. He leaned in and attempted to undress me. His movements were clumsy and desperate. Just as his intentions became clear, his eyes rolled back and he slumped forward, his head resting heavily on my shoulder. I gently eased him onto the couch, watching as he fell into a deep sleep. My heart raced as I stood there for a moment, gathering my thoughts and the courage to proceed. Taking a deep breath, I made my way to his bedroom door. It was always firmly shut whenever I visited, but now with him unconscious, I knew this was my chance. I struggled to open the door at first. I noticed it was an odd-shaped keyhole and that it was locked. I panicked, looking for a key. I checked the kitchen drawers and the living room, and that's when I knew I had to check him. I reached for his pocket, afraid he might wake up. I couldn't find the key. I only found his wallet, a vape, and a pack of gum. I thought that maybe this was all for nothing until I opened the wallet and found the key stashed between his money. I felt overcome with relief and took the key to the bedroom. I hesitated for just a second before pushing the door open. The sight that greeted me was worse than I had imagined. The walls were covered in photos of me, some taken through the telescope, others obviously snapped without my knowledge. I saw photos of me in restaurants with my friends, and even some from inside of my apartment. There were drawings, notes, and even some of my missing personal items. He had built an entire shrine of me, and it made my skin crawl. I took photos of everything, documenting the disturbing collection. I went through his things, and I knew this was the evidence I needed. I slipped out of his house, leaving him to sleep. The next morning, I went straight to the police with the photo evidence. They finally took me seriously. The photos were undeniable proof of his stalking and obsession. The one who told me that it wasn't illegal to own a telescope said, "We failed you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. Your bravery in gathering this evidence has made a huge difference." Detectives examined the evidence and prepared to arrest Joseph. Turns out he had charges pressed against him by his ex-girlfriend for stalking her after their relationship. He was arrested later that day, and I breathed a sigh of relief. When they asked how I had gotten into his house, I explained our so-called friendship. I told them how he would come over to my house with gifts and how I would spend time with him so I could gain his trust. I even told them about Chris and Curtis. The officers were shocked but understood why I had to do it. As they led Joseph out of his apartment in handcuffs, I stood across the street, watching. He glanced over at me. He looked hurt and betrayed, but I felt nothing but relief. Update. I walked away from this whole situation with a lot of psychological scars and a deep fear of people. It has been over a year since it all went down, and although I am happy to say that I have dealt with the situation, I'm not happy to inform that the mark he left on me was so severe I now struggle with dating. I was so scared of my old house and that street that I spontaneously quit my job and moved out, living in my car for about a month until I was able to find a new home a few states away. I also found a job in a field that I like, so that's something I guess. But in general, life is pretty bleak right now. There are still nights where I dream of him, and every time someone rings my doorbell, I still have the fear of it being him. However, I do know that is not the case, as he was sentenced to 7 years in a state prison, followed by a mandatory psychological treatment. At least I can take solace in that.
Mom wished my sister had married my husband instead of me, and sister's been coming over when I'm gone, walking around in towels, and it turns out my husband actually can't stand her. I am upset at my mom and my sister because of something my mother said, but everyone around me feels I'm overreacting. Please be brutally honest in telling me if I am being insecure, or if my mom and my husband are wrong in this. Let me give you a bit of backstory. My husband James, 34M, and I, 29F, were neighbors growing up. My sister, Fran, 34F, was in the same grade as my husband growing up. Everyone knew my sister in school because she is very smart and beautiful. James had a huge crush on her and all of us knew about it. He asked her out for senior prom and Fran shot him down, in front of the whole school. They still remained friends, but he moved to a different state for college, and we did not hear much from him, except see him when he came back for holidays. James and I were never friends growing up, since I was in middle school when this happened. In fact, I was much younger than both of them, and they would actively avoid me or involving me in their hangouts and activities. I went to a good college and got my first job in the same city as James. My mom suggested I should contact James, since I did not know anyone there. We became friends and 3 years later, we got married. We both have high-paying jobs and love our life. We moved back to our hometown during COVID as James's mom had health issues, and our jobs allowed us to work remotely. Fran also had a pretty good life. She married when she was 23 and her husband was pretty well off. 2 years ago, Fran discovered that he was cheating on her for almost the entire duration of their marriage with multiple partners, and she decided to break things off. Fran moved back with my mom. Fran had not worked for the entire duration of their marriage and was expecting to gain significant alimony from the divorce. However, due to complications regarding prenup, she barely got anything and is struggling financially. She got a job but is barely able to afford her own place and continues living with my mom. James and I were very supportive of her during the whole process. Since James and Fran were friends growing up, they both have a special bond. They have their inside jokes and stories, and I sometimes feel like a third wheel when we all meet. However, James keeps his distance and has never given me any reason to believe that he has lingering feelings for her. Fran, on the other hand, constantly visits us, like 2 to 3 times a week, and ends up staying for dinner and sleeping in our guest room. I don't mind her coming over, but I do not like the fact that she talks more to James than with me. Also, she always comes over when I am not at home, and I often find them sitting next to each other on sofa and watching TV when I get home. It sort of reminds me of my childhood where I was locked out of our basement when Fran had friends over, and I would feel left out. Fran is also too comfortable around James and walks around the house in just a towel after her shower when James is around, or sleep in her underwear in guest room without locking the door. I have voiced my concerns to her, but she says that we are family, and she does not care. I have also voiced my concerns to James, and he does make efforts now to explain stories and inside jokes if Fran makes them. The main issue happened this weekend. I was hanging out with my mom and Fran last weekend, and Fran was recollecting stories about how James would do her homework and do chores for her growing up. She said he was so much in love with me, and I felt guilty taking advantage of him. My mom jokingly said to her that I wish you had the wits to marry James than your loser husband and you would have not been in this situation. Fran smiled after hearing that and nodded, but I was hurt by the comment. I protested to my mom that James is my husband, and I do not want her to make such comments about him. My mom doubled down and said that she feels like it because both James and I are high earners, while Fran is struggling. So, it would make sense if Fran was married to James, and I would be fine since I do not need James to support me financially. She kept on saying that it was a hypothetical, and just wants both her daughters to be happy. I did not like those comments and told them to not speak like that about James and my marriage in general. Fran chimed in and told me that I should not take the comments so personally, and I am being too sensitive. However, I had a fight with both of them, and I left. When I came home, and told James, he also sided with my mom and Fran and told me that her mom just made a harmless joke. I also raised the issue of Fran's behavior around our house, and he told me that this is between me and my sister, and he is not going to tell Fran about what she can or cannot wear in our house. However, I am just feeling really bad since the situation, and despite everyone apologizing to me, things just don't feel right. Am I wrong here in reacting the way I did, or does everyone else have a point, and I should be more secure about my relationship with James? Comments where Op has replied, Commenter, NTA, your mother's comment was inappropriate and disrespectful towards your marriage, and it's concerning that your husband is dismissing your feelings about Fran's behavior. It's not about insecurity, it's about wanting respect in your relationship and home. Op, this has been a pattern through my life. Due to age difference, Fran has always treated me like a kid. I just felt insulted that my mom completely ignored my feelings while making such comments. However, a part of me also has been jealous of Fran because of all the attention she got, and I was the nerdy little weird girl in our family. Commenter, I'm waiting for Fran to try attempt something with your husband within 3 to 6 months. Also, you need to tell her no more sleepovers or just showing up. And put some clothes on for God's sake. And this is a firm boundary. And no, you don't care if they think you're overreacting. This is how it's going to be. All these comments have me really alarmed. I am going to talk to my husband regarding this. I do not want to be accusatory, but this whole situation has made me really insecure, and I was barely able to sleep last night. I trust him with all my heart, but I really am rethinking all the things Fran has done around him and how she has undermined and belittled my feelings on every occasion. As for my mom, I got a half-assed apology from her last night about how she just blurted out something stupid and how I am overreacting to all this, and she only wishes the best for both her daughters. Update, October 22, 2024. Thanks everyone for all your support on my previous post. To summarize what happened, my mom made a really off-putting comment that she wished my sister, Fran, was married to my husband, James. I got really mad, and my husband also tried to undermine my feelings and told me I was overreacting to a harmless joke. Sorry for the long post, but a lot of you were messaging me for update, and wanted to tell what happened. The comments really made me paranoid, and I did see everyone's point that James may have just married me because of his crush on Fran. This really shot up my anxiety, and I started snooping around. My husband literally makes me check his phone for new messages when he is not around. So, I knew there was nothing to hide there. However, I was spooked by how my sister always knows when I am not at home, and why James and Fran are always sitting on the same couch when I come home. I tried talking to my husband, and he told me that my feelings were valid. However, he also said that Fran is going through a tough time and refused to say anything bad about my mom and Fran. Last Friday, I went to gym as usual in the evening, and when I came home, Fran was sitting in the living room, while James was cooking dinner. I got a bit angry and asked her what she is doing here. She said had no plans for the night, and she came to hang out with us. It really annoyed me, and I told her that I wanted to spend a quiet weekend with my husband and if she can come some other time. She could see I was upset. She started saying how our mom was just being silly, and I need to let it go since it was just a joke. I told her I did not find it funny, and we got into a fight. She said that I am always an insecure, annoying kid and no wonder no one liked me. It really hurt me, but James stepped in and told Fran that she needs to leave. I have never seen James be so forceful with Fran. Fran muttered some unpleasant things to James, and then left. I was in tears by the end of the whole thing and James was consoling me. I was really upset and spent the night in our room alone. In the morning, I prepared notes on all things I wanted to ask James. Your comments really helped me get my thoughts straight. I know I was being very insecure, but after reading the comments, I really started questioning if James really married me for me, or just because I was Fran's sister and looked like her. People called me Dollar Store Fran in high school. James and I had a long conversation, and I told him my anxieties and insecurities. I told him how it makes me feel that he spends so much time with Fran when she visits us, and they have their own inside jokes. I asked him if he still has feelings for her. He was calm and smiling the whole time. He told me that he will tell me the truth but does not want me to hate him for it later. He said that he knows Fran used him all through their school days, because she knew he liked her. When he went to college, Fran still tried to keep in touch with him, but putting distance between them made him realize how badly she treated him, and he decided to just cut contact with her so that he can work on himself. That was the reason. He rarely visited us when he used to come for holidays and stopped being friends with Fran. I told him that it bothered me that he chose Fran before me and ignored me during our childhood. That was the reason I always had that doubt if I was his second choice. He said that I was 13 when he went to college and if he would have liked me instead of Fran at that age, we would be having a different problem. He told me that when I contacted him, he thought that I must be like Fran and was not very enthusiastic to meet me. However, after we hung out for few times, he realized I am nothing like Fran. We soon became close, started dating and got married after a few years. He told me that Fran was married by then, and he saw that I always put Fran on the pedestal and would get jealous when Fran posted vacation pictures or the new shiny things her husband bought for her. That was the reason he never told me that he does not like hanging around Fran, as he feels that for me, Fran was always the North Star. He told me that he has always kept his distance from Fran, and she was a non-issue since we would meet her only few times every year. However, after her divorce, he did not know how to act. He said that he was grateful to me for uprooting our lives and moving back to our hometown for his mom's health. He wanted to do the same and take care of my family. When Fran got divorced, he supported her in every way he could for me, even though he realized it meant spending a lot of time with her and listening to her bring up all the memories from high school that he wants to forget. I told him it bothered me that Fran came to our house as often as she does, and generally in evenings when I go to gym. He told me that he also finds it odd that she knows my gym routine and always comes on evenings when I am not at home. However, he told me that he has always kept his distance from her, and if she did anything that would raise an alarm, he would have told me immediately. She just makes him all the old movies or TV shows they watched growing up, and gossips endlessly about their high school friends. He told me I need to trust him, and if I want him to be the bad guy and ask Fran to not visit us often, he can do that for me. However, he knows that I will eventually make up with my mom and Fran and does not want to blame him for being mean to Fran. However, he told me he will not tell Fran what to wear around the house, as it would be creepy if it came from him. I felt I got all the assurance I needed from James, and I will never doubt how amazing of a husband he has been. My mom and Fran visited us on Sunday, and my mom profusely apologized to me. She told me she does not want me to feel bad for her comment and she would never wish anything bad on my marriage. She meant to say that James was a great guy, and she hopes Fran can find someone like him one day. Fran was a bit sour but apologized to us for all the name calling on Friday and told us that it's just her hormones. She said that she likes hanging out with her sister and her best friend, and hence comes to our house. I told her she is welcome to come anytime she wants, but to call ahead of time in case James and I have plans for the evening, and she agreed. I really want to move past this issue, but I do want to put some firm boundaries on when Fran can come to our house and hang out with James alone, as I know it bothers him too. Overall, I feel things are good now. I am glad my worst fears did not come true, but I do feel I need some therapy in order to deal with my insecurities. Next story. GF wanted an open relationship because she was curious to explore. After our breakup, she confessed she'd been cheating for months, slept with him right after we split. Hello everyone. I've, 19M, been with my girlfriend, 20F, for about 2 to 3 years now. Things have always been good between us. We had a solid relationship, sweet moments, and all the usual stuff that comes with being in a serious, committed relationship. From the beginning, we were clear that our relationship would be exclusive. I'm strictly monogamous. I don't have anything against open relationships or polyamory, but it's just not something I could handle in a serious relationship, where my feelings are involved. Lately, though, things started to get weird. She began making comments about other guys, saying how she found some random dude sexy or how attractive someone else was. At first, I just brushed it off and didn't make a big deal out of it, but these comments became more frequent, and honestly it started to feel a bit overwhelming. Then came the real shocker. She told me she was starting to get interested in other people. She said she still loved me, but she wanted to explore things both personally and sexually, so she then asked, "What if we open the relationship?" I was stunned for a moment and nervously laughed, which she noticed. I half joked, half seriously replied, "Then I'm not going to be a part of it, ha ha." She got the hint, but still kept pushing the idea. I got frustrated and asked her why she wanted this. She said she was curious and wanted to explore her sexuality without damaging the emotional bond we had. I was taken aback but responded, "I support your decision to explore, but if you want that, then forget about me. You know very well that exclusivity is crucial to me in a serious relationship." This led to a heated argument. She accused me of being closed-minded and called me a coward for not being willing to try something new. Those words hurt, and later that night in my home I lay in bed wondering if there was a way to talk this through or find some middle ground. We did eventually meet up again to discuss things more calmly, but no matter what, I just couldn't accept the idea of opening the relationship. Even if I also had the freedom to see other people, it was a solid no from me. I told her, "I'm sorry, but we couldn't come to an agreement. You know my stance on this kind of relationship. I'm glad you want to explore this, but unfortunately, I won't be the person to do that with. Let's just end things now, save ourselves the drama, and move on. You'll have the freedom to do what you want, and I won't have to deal with the anxiety of knowing you're with someone else." She didn't take it well, called me selfish again, and repeated that I was insecure. At that point, I just stayed silent and let her say what she needed to say. We both sat there for a while, both of us with tears in our eyes. We eventually said our goodbyes. She still told me everything she previously thought about me, and after I got home, I saw that she had blocked me on everything. I just let out a sigh and laid down on my bed. Right now, I'm focusing on myself and moving forward, trying to maintain zero contact with her. So, Ida for breaking up with my girlfriend because she wanted an open relationship, even though she knew my stance on it? Edit. Thanks you all for your comments. I really can't reply to all of them, but I read all them. You all really give me good advices, and also some reasons that I will reflect on. Anyway, THX, if something happens these days and I see it conveniently, I'd make an update. October 27, 2024. For the record, forgive me if this have some errors, as this post will be raw and English isn't my first language. Now, I will give you more context. It's been 5 days since we broke up. During these days, I have been reflecting, mostly due to some comments on the previous post, mentioning that maybe she was always like this, that we were just incompatible, that we are young, and that she has the right to explore her sexuality or whatever. I admit I shouldn't have done it, but I kept thinking and racking my brain more and more, was she really like this? I didn't pay attention to this when we made the relationship official, because this felt so strange to me when we decided to make things serious, cause I asked for exclusivity, and she agreed, even emphasized it herself, which left me more and more confused. Anyway, yesterday I ran into her. I know, that maybe was an error. I tried to ignore her, but I couldn't, since now she wanted to talk to me and I was about to reject her, but my thoughts got the better of me, and I agreed, mainly to ask her about my doubts. We went to her house, and although she tried to be nice, I just asked her to get to the point. We sat down at the table and talked. She tried to ask me how I was doing, but I just dodged the question, and then I confronted her again, asking why she was now bringing up polyamory and all that after so much time being with me, after even she agreed to exclusivity and emphasized it. When I said this, I raised my voice, basically shouting at her. Then I got my answer, and although it was predictable, it still shocked me. Long story short, yes, she has indeed been emotionally cheating on me and was tempted to do it physically. I just stood there, stunned, took a deep breath, and even though I was really angry, I asked her, since when and with whom? According to her, she spent the last 2 months with a guy she met at her college, which coincides suspiciously with when she started acting weird. I raised my voice again, asking what she thought by not telling me. Did she think I was an idiot, even trying to manipulate me to open the relationship? She said that she didn't want to lose me, that she loved me, and as for opening the relationship, it was advice from her friends. I must clarify that not all of them are women. They told me that she had the right to explore while still being with me, that they even do it, and they still with their partners, and some of their partners have no idea about it. What a shitty people in this life. Honestly, I had a fucking urge to scream at her as loud as I could, but I had to keep my composure. I asked her what she did with this guy, if they were still in touch. She just told me that the same day we broke up, she slept with him, but later she regretted it, and in these last few days, she realized her mistake and wanted to be honest with me now, with the possibility to give her another opportunity. I couldn't deal with her anymore, and I told her she had almost 3 fucking months to be honest with me, and instead tried to manipulate me into falling into her trap so she could walk away without any guilt. I told her that if she wants to cry, go ahead, cause I won't give her another chance, and I don't care anymore because I lost the little respect I had for her. With a knot in my throat from the hurt, I told her clearly that I never want to see her in my fucking life again, and that if she sees me in a store, she should avoid me and go somewhere else because I don't want to see or hear her. She broke down crying again, begging me to forgive her, grabbing my shirt to stop me from leaving. I pushed her away, opened the door, and slammed it shut once I got home, and it would be a lie to say I didn't shed tears. We're young, she wanted to explore her sexuality, and she's right to do so. She was right to tell me, she is not the asshole either. Pure bullshit. Now, I'm still incredibly hurt. I feel worse than when I started, and I feel like an idiot for even crying, knowing this could have been a possibility. I will see if I can get back on my feet and move on. Even though I'm still hurt, that's the only thing I can do. Man, I really thought I had a decent girlfriend. Frown. Caught my husband with my friend on our kitchen counter, so I filmed everything as proof and called her husband. Now they're jobless, living with my daughter who defended him. Last year was, without a doubt, the most devastating year of my entire life. I accidentally discovered that my then husband, Liam, was cheating on me with my best friend, Abby. I was away on a work trip for a few days. That trip was supposed to last longer, but luckily the work got done, so I ended up coming home early. I wanted to surprise Liam, so I did not bother informing him beforehand. When I got home, I saw Abby's car in the driveway and was confused. Abby was my friend since our college days, and over the years, her husband and I, along with my husband, had all become close friends. However, I had never known her to stop by without letting me know first. I checked my phone to see if she had called or if my husband had texted me to let me know Abby was here, but there were no messages at all. As I entered the house, I could hear some noises coming from the kitchen. Curious, I walked towards the noise, and that is when I spotted Liam and Abby, on our kitchen counter, kissing each other, and doing the unspeakable. They were so engrossed in each other, that they didn't even notice me standing there. I just stood in stunned silence, frozen by the shock of what I was witnessing. The sight of them together, in the place where me and my husband had shared so many family meals and memories together, felt like a knife to the heart. The bag slipped out of my hands as I continued to watch in disbelief. My mind struggled to process the scene in front of me. My husband, The man who had stopped being intimate with me for the past 3 months, the same man who had been cruelly calling me names like fat pig and hippo even though I wasn't overweight at all, was there, passionately kissing and touching my best friend like she was his wife. For months, he had made me feel so insecure, constantly criticizing my body, pressuring me to go to the gym and basically blaming me for why he doesn't feel attracted to me anymore. As a result, I'd been feeling awful about myself, thinking I wasn't good enough for him anymore, but all that time, it wasn't about me. It was about him and his newfound partner. That moment shattered me. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the realization that the man I had loved and the friend I had confided in had both conspired to break my heart in the cruelest way imaginable. Something inside me snapped at that moment. It was like all the pain, betrayal, and humiliation I had felt over the last few months came flooding to the surface all at once. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and started filming them. My hands were shaking, but I knew I needed evidence of what I was witnessing. Then, fueled by pure rage, I walked right into the kitchen where they were still entangled. There was a pan lying on the counter, and without hesitation, I picked it up and threw it at my husband to get their attention. The pan hit him with a loud thud, and both of them jumped in shock. Their heads whipped around, and the looks on their faces were priceless. Their eyes widened in horror as they saw me standing there, phone in hand, recording every second of their shame. Abby started scrambling to cover up her body, looking desperate as she tried to hide herself from the camera. I was so disgusted by what she had done that I walked right up to her and slapped her hard across the face. The sound of it echoed through the kitchen, and she just stood there, stunned and humiliated. Then, as Liam tried to intervene, I turned and shoved him away from me. I didn't care. All the while, I kept my phone in my hand, recording everything. It felt like the only thing keeping me grounded in that moment. I wanted both of them to feel the pain that I was feeling. But I wasn't done. I stopped the recording and immediately video called Abby's husband, Kyle. My heart was racing, but I knew this was the right thing to do. When he answered the call, he had no idea what was coming. I turned the phone to show him his half-naked wife frantically trying to find her clothes, fumbling to dress herself in shame. I calmly told him exactly what had happened, that I had come home early from my trip and caught his wife and my husband together in our kitchen. Kyle was stunned. I could see the shock and disbelief on his face, just as I had felt only minutes before. He didn't even have words, completely taken aback, much like I had been when I first walked in. Liam tried to hide his face in shame, all the while, yelling at me that I was going too far by humiliating them this way. I told Kyle I was letting him know because he deserved to know the truth, just like I did. No one should be blindsided by betrayal like this. After that, I turned my attention back to Abby. She was still trying to apologize, trying to explain herself through her tears, begging me to just listen to her, but I asked her to leave my house right then and there, before I harmed her any further. No apology from her or my ex-husband could ever make up for the betrayal I had just uncovered. I watched as Abby hurried out, humiliated and ashamed, while Liam stood there, looking helpless and defeated. You might say I have a short temper, but I've worked hard all my life and built a successful career for myself. I've never really needed anyone to survive. Hence, I would have been fine had my husband simply asked for a divorce, but the fact that he chose to sleep with my best friend in my own house that I paid for behind my back was unforgivable. When Liam tried to apologize, saying he was sorry and asking for another chance, promising he could be a better husband, I ignored him and started packing up his things. I informed him that he and I were done, and I was going to divorce him, no matter what he said to me. Hearing this, he started yelling at me for bringing up divorce, which is so insensitive to throw at someone's face for a foolish mistake. He even attempted to hold my hands to stop me from packing his things, which is when I threatened to call the police and have him removed from the house in front of all our neighbors. I knew how much he valued his reputation, which is why I also knew that this loser would have never stopped cheating on me or confessed about the affair had I not discovered it with my own eyes. You see, at the time, my ex-husband, Liam, wasn't even working. He had been let go from his job after being caught breaking some company rules, and while I don't feel like diving into the details of what he did, it was serious enough that one of his co-workers reported him. As a result, he was immediately fired. While I was the primary breadwinner, he became a stay-at-home husband after that. In truth, it wasn't a financial strain on us. I earned 3 times what he was making anyway, so taking care of all the expenses on my own didn't really bother me. What I didn't realize at the time, however, was how he was spending all that extra time. I suppose, in hindsight, it makes sense. I knew for a while Abby and Kyle had been having some struggles in their marriage. With Liam being home all day and Abby also having issues in her own marriage with her husband, Kyle, they probably had more than enough opportunity to connect on a deeper level. To think that while I was out working hard to support our family, Liam was betraying me right under our own roof, in my own home, With someone I trusted completely, it's a rage that's hard to put into words. Meanwhile, Liam kept trying to argue with me, saying that divorce wasn't an option since we had been married for so long and that we should go for couple counseling instead. He had the nerve to act like the victim, almost as if I was the one who had done something wrong by even suggesting for us to part ways. I stared at him, disbelief and anger burning in my chest, and I asked him point blank if he had seriously thought about the consequences before he decided to sleep with my best friend. Did it cross his mind at all, what might happen? Did he expect me to forgive and forget and just keep living with him? Liam's face turned beet red, clearly flustered, and he stammered out that he had always been loyal to me all these years, so I should not just throw away our marriage for one mistake. Then he further tried to downplay it, saying this was only the 4th time he and Abby had slept together, as if that somehow made it any less of a betrayal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He then had the audacity to blame Abby for the whole thing, claiming that she had been the one to seduce him because her own marriage with Kyle was falling apart. The level of denial and cowardice was unreal. I could barely stand to look at him. It was clear that this man, the one I had once called my husband, was no longer someone I could stay married to any longer. After a lot of back and forth, I successfully managed to kick Liam out of the house. Unsurprisingly, with nowhere else to go, Liam reached out to our adult daughter, Mary, for help. Now, I've always known that Mary is closer to her father. She's been a daddy's girl for as long as I can remember, and I never had any issue with that. I loved that she had such a strong bond with him, even if it sometimes meant they were a bit closer than we were. When Mary called me, her voice was filled with confusion and concern. She asked what had happened, and told me how Liam had called her for help, telling her how I had kicked him out because of a silly fight and he was now homeless. I told her the truth, and also sent her the video I had taken of Liam and Abby together. I didn't want there to be any doubt in her mind about what her father had done. She deserved to know exactly why things had reached this point. Mary was understandably furious with her dad after seeing the proof I had. She told me how she couldn't believe that her dad could do something so disgusting and understood why I kicked him out. However, despite her anger, she told me that she still had this hope that I might reconsider, that maybe, in time, I could process everything and find a way to work things out. She reassured me that she would take care of Liam for the time being. As hurt as she was by his actions, she couldn't just turn her back on him entirely, and I understood that. In the days that followed, both Liam and Mary started taking turns calling me, each trying to convince me to forgive him for the sake of the family. It felt like emotional manipulation at its worst, especially coming from Liam, who was clearly using Mary's affection for him to sway her in his favor. I could see right through it, and it made me even angrier. I was furious at him for dragging our daughter into this mess, trying to play on her love for him to get what he wanted. At the same time, I was deeply hurt and confused by Mary's stance. I couldn't understand why, in such a difficult time, she seemed more focused on supporting her dad than me. It was like she was blind to the pain I was going through, and that hurt more than I can explain. Despite their efforts, I made the decision to move forward with the divorce. I wasn't going to be manipulated or guilt-tripped into staying in such a toxic marriage. So, I went ahead and filed for divorce from Liam, fully knowing it was the right thing for me. Around the same time, Kyle, Abby's husband, was going through his own process of filing for divorce. He was just as devastated as I was, and in that shared pain, we became really good friends. He was one of the few people who truly understood what I was going through, and having him to talk to made the entire situation a little more bearable. To be clear, though, we've always remained just friends. Nothing romantic has ever or will ever happen between us. Anyways, when I finally served Liam with the divorce papers at Mary's house, he started begging me for forgiveness, making all sorts of promises about how he would never so much as look at another woman again and how he was ready to cut Abby out of our lives for good. It was pathetic, to be honest, watching him try to clean up the mess he had created only when he realized I was serious about leaving. Since Mary was there when I served him the papers, she urged me to reconsider for the sake of her. She told me how she had seen firsthand how much her dad loves me while she was growing up, and that just because he had slept with someone else, accidentally, as she put it, didn't mean he loved that woman. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying hard to defend her father, to downplay the seriousness of what he had done, but I wasn't about to let that sway me. I told her there was nothing for me to think over when the fact was simple. Her dad had betrayed me, and not just in any typical way, but with my best friend, and in our own home. There was no coming back from that. I wasn't going to waste time debating whether or not to give him another chance. He had destroyed our marriage, and I was determined to leave him. Mary tried to argue with me a bit, asking if I would really be happy without him in my life. I told her that, yes, I was absolutely going to be happy now that I wouldn't have to worry about my husband sleeping with anyone while I was busy with work and bringing in the money. This wasn't a decision I had come to lightly. I had made up my mind, and no amount of pleading or reasoning was going to change that. The divorce process turned out to be surprisingly simple. Early on in our marriage, I had insisted on a prenuptial agreement, and because of that, Liam couldn't lay a finger on any of my assets. To make sure things went smoothly, I had hired the best lawyer in town, someone who knew exactly how to handle cases like mine. It was clear from the start that my victory in court was inevitable. When the divorce was finally finalized, it felt like an immense weight had been lifted off my shoulders, almost as if I had been freed from a prison I hadn't even realized I was in. For so long, I had been so blindly in love with Liam that I couldn't see how much better my life could be without him. It was as if his toxic presence had been dragging me down like a dead weight, suffocating me. But now, I was free to live my life on my own terms, without the constant hurt and betrayal hanging over me. As word spread in our circle about what had happened between Liam and Abby, more and more people started reaching out to me. Friends, family members, and even acquaintances began to show their support, letting me know they were there for me. Even Liam's own family made it very clear that I had done the right thing by divorcing him. They were furious with him, completely disgusted by his behavior, and in some ways, their support made me feel validated. It was a relief to realize that I wasn't alone in this, that people saw through Liam's actions and stood by my side. However, the only person who remained in Liam's corner was our daughter, Mary. Somehow, despite everything, she still felt sorry for him. Maybe it was the lifelong bond she had with her father, or maybe it was her way of coping with the entire situation. This year, I decided to go all out for my birthday. It was my first birthday as a single woman after being married to Liam for so long, and I felt like celebrating my newfound freedom. My friends and I planned a huge bash, complete with a caterer and a guest list of 50 to 60 people. I wanted it to be a night to remember. Naturally, Kyle was on the guest list too, especially since he had finally recently divorced Abby after months and months of court proceedings, and we had become good friends through everything. I did send an invitation to Mary, but I made it very clear that Liam was not welcome. He was still living with Mary, and there was no way I was going to let him ruin my night. On my birthday, as the party kicked off, everyone seemed to be having a great time. People were doing shots, the energy was fantastic, and it felt like the perfect way to mark this new chapter of my life. When it came time to cut the cake, some of my close friends gave heartfelt speeches, talking about how proud they were of me for getting through such a tough year. They spoke about the betrayal I had endured and how much happier I seemed now. I was touched by the love and kindness they showed. After everything that had happened, it was nice to feel seen and valued by the people who mattered most. But then, out of nowhere, Mary stood up and announced that she had a few words she wanted to say also. I could tell she had been drinking. She looked a little unsteady, but then again, many of the guests were tipsy by this point, so I didn't think much of it at first. I figured she just wanted to wish me a happy birthday or maybe share some sweet memories. However, Mary began to criticize me in front of everyone. She talked about how disappointed she was in me for destroying my years of marriage with my ex and how heartbroken he was. Her words were loud, emotional, and full of anger. She went on to recount how, growing up, she had always believed her parents had the perfect marriage, and how I had been the one to shatter that dream by leaving Liam without even trying to work on our problems. She called me a selfish mom, accusing me of only thinking about myself when I decided to file for divorce. Her words cut deep, and hearing them in front of all my friends, on a night meant to celebrate my freedom and happiness, was gut-wrenching. Before I could even process what was happening, people started coming to my defense. My friends had seen firsthand what I had been through and weren't about to let Mary's words go unchallenged. Kyle also spoke up. He told Mary that she had no right to be angry at me when it was her dad who had betrayed me in the most hurtful way possible. He reminded her that, as my daughter and as a fellow woman, she should be more sympathetic and understanding towards me, instead of casting blame where it didn't belong. Mary tried to argue back, clearly upset, but her words were getting lost in the growing frustration of the crowd. Some of the guests even started booing her loudly, clearly appalled by how she was treating me, especially on a night like this. At that moment, I felt a wave of emotions hit me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at Mary, the daughter I had raised and loved so much. Mary, I think you've forgotten something important. From the very start, it was me who provided for this family. Your father, Liam, moved into my house after we got married. And while I was pregnant with you, he never truly stepped up as a parent. When I went into labor, it was me who endured hours of pain to bring you into this world. And when it came to raising you, I was the one who stayed home, took care of you, and made sure you had everything you needed. Even when I returned to work, I was the one who hired a nanny to help with your care. I was the primary breadwinner, working long hours to provide the comfortable life that you grew to enjoy. My income paid for the roof over our heads, the food on our table, and all the luxuries that you and your dad benefited from. I didn't just stop there. I continued to recount to Mary how when she had started looking for career opportunities, it was me who had used my connections to help her get an internship and eventually a job. I did all of that for her, while Liam did nothing. He wasn't there to guide or support her in the ways that mattered. He was the fun parent who spent just a few hours of his day with her, and she somehow thought the world of him. And now, after everything I had done for her and for our family, I was the one being blamed for finally standing up for myself for choosing to leave a toxic marriage. With a heavy heart, I informed her that she needed to leave. This was supposed to be my night, a celebration of my strength and resilience, but instead, she had turned it into a scene. Before leaving, Mary threatened me, saying that she would be cutting off contact with me for good. I stood my ground, despite the pain I felt, and told her that I was fine with it as long as she was happy with her decision. In that moment, as much as it hurt, I knew if Mary couldn't understand why I had to leave Liam, then maybe the distance between us was what we both needed. Watching her walk out of my party was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I knew, deep down, that I had to choose myself this time. It wasn't about being selfish, it was about standing up for the life and happiness I deserved, no matter who tried to make me feel guilty for it. Ever since this incident at the party, some of my family members who were present at the event have reached out to me, saying that I might have been a bit too cruel to my daughter and have urged me to reach out to her and apologize since she is going through a lot. They also feel that I humiliated my daughter by saying all those things in front of everyone when I could have talked to her privately. Ida for finally standing up to my daughter? Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect to receive so many DMs and comments from strangers here, all offering their wholehearted support. It feels comforting to know I didn't do anything wrong. As a mom, I'm sometimes overwhelmed with guilt. I know I made the right decision, but I still struggle with that nagging mom guilt and sometimes wonder if I should have tried harder to make things work with Liam, just for Mary's sake. As for why Mary is so fixated on our marriage, I really don't know. She's an only child and probably never imagined her parents would get divorced like her friends' parents have done. Honestly, I never thought I'd end up divorcing my ex either, but Liam's actions left me with no choice. I just could never stay in that situation. Update 2. It's been a month and a half since my last update. For everyone asking about Liam and Abby, I finally have some interesting news for you. I had mentioned before that Abby and Kyle got divorced just before my birthday party. The reason their divorce proceedings took so long, unlike mine, was because Abby and Kyle share 3 children together and they never had a prenup. However, what worked for Kyle was that he had legitimate proof that Abby had cheated, which meant she couldn't win alimony anymore. However, because of their children, she and her lawyer fought hard to successfully win child support. Since Kyle earns very well, this essentially means that the child support he is going to pay for the 3 children will be more than enough to even cover her needs. She won't even need to work and can probably sustain with just a part-time job if necessary. Now, my daughter Mary, who had decided to stop talking to me since the party and had cut off all contact, reached out to me in tears yesterday. It turns out that just a few days after my party, Liam surprised our daughter by announcing that Abby and her 3 kids would be staying with them for the next few weeks. Mary was shocked because Liam made this decision without even consulting her, and since this was her place, she had to take on the responsibility of all their expenses as both Liam and Abby don't have a job currently. Liam urged her to learn to accept his new family and talked about how they could all start afresh together. When Abby and her kids moved in, they acted as though it was their place, not Mary's. Mary, who works from home, lost all her privacy. Liam and Abby would often leave their kids with Mary to babysit without asking and go out for hours to enjoy romantic time together. Mary was at her wit's end and called me to ask for help getting rid of Liam and Abby. She said she couldn't live with her dad anymore and needed me to talk to them and make them move out because she was too scared to stand up to her dad herself. I was furious that, after weeks of silence and the humiliation she put me through at my birthday party, Mary had the audacity to ask for my help without even having the decency to apologize first. I firmly told her she should have considered the consequences of supporting her cheating dad over me. I made it clear that she deserved this for taking his side and that she should stick to her words and not contact me ever again. Since then, she's been bombarding me with calls and texts, calling me a bad mother for not helping her out and insisting that, as a parent, it's my duty to stand up for her. Update 3. Just wanted to say that I do agree with the general consensus that my daughter is spineless when it comes to her dad. I don't know why she is so blinded by him. However, I do not plan on helping her out in any way. It's obvious that Liam and Abby are using her as a free babysitter and will continue to use her unless she stands up for herself and kicks them out. It's incredibly gross and disappointing that Liam allowed Abby to move in with them, especially given how Mary had been defending him so passionately at my birthday party. It's clear that my decision to divorce Liam was the right one. He would have definitely continued his affair with Abby if I hadn't left. I decided to send an email to my daughter, once and for all, just like some of you suggested. Here's what I wrote. Hey Mary, I'm still upset about how you treated me, but that doesn't change the fact that you need to stand up for yourself now. It's your home, and you shouldn't have to put up with Dad and Abby acting like they own the place. It's time to take control and let them know they can't stay there. You need to set clear boundaries and stand firm. If you don't, they will continue to use you as a cash cow forever. Your dad is not your responsibility. I hope you find the strength to do what's right for yourself. In the future, if you ever truly realize the error in your ways and want to apologize, I will be here. Until then, take care. I also reached out to Kyle to inform him about Abby's current living arrangement, and the way she has been neglecting the kids by forcing my daughter, Mary, to take care of them. Turns out that he had also recently discovered Abby and Liam had been living together, a fact Abby had been concealing from him ever since she moved in with Liam. She knowingly never let him pick up the kids from Mary's palace, and they would always meet at a neutral location somewhere outside. She would also make those innocent kids lie to him by instructing them to never mention Mary's home or that Liam was living with them. When he did eventually find out from mutual friends about Abby staying at Mary's place, he was shocked and was questioning the validity of the information as he didn't have any proof yet. However, after I confirmed the details with him, his mind is now made up. He and his lawyer plan to fight for custody of his children to remove them from Abby's care permanently. If Kyle succeeds, Abby will lose the child support she's been relying on. With both Abby and Liam currently jobless, their financial situation would become even more dire. Without that support, they could face significant challenges, and if Mary decides to kick them out, they could also end up on the streets. I just hope that my daughter finally does the right thing.